History taught you about the Vikings, the longships, the raids, the warriors who carved their names into Europe with iron and blood. But here's what they never taught you in school. There was a special class of Viking warrior, one that terrified both their enemies and their own shield brothers. Men who fought naked, men who bit their shields until splinters tore their gums, men who couldn't tell whether the face in front of them belonged to a friend or an enemy and didn't care either way. And the reason why changes everything you thought you knew about Viking warfare. The Berserkers. History packaged them as elite Viking supersoldiers, the special forces of the medieval world. You've seen them in movies, in video games, in every pop culture version of the Viking Age. Hulking men wearing bear skins, frothing at the mouth, immune to pain. But the real story of the Berserkers is darker than any legend, and it starts in a grave in Denmark. 980 CE, Firkat, Denmark. Archaeologists opened the burial of a woman laid to rest inside the body of a wagon, a sign that she mattered. She's dressed in blue and red cloth threaded with gold. Around her, grave goods fit for someone powerful. A copper pot, silver jewelry, tools used for ritual magic. And inside a small leather pouch beside her body, seeds. Henbane seeds. Hyoscyamus niger. A plant so toxic that even touching the leaves can raise blisters on your skin. Ingest the seeds and you enter a world where the dead appear to speak, where faces become unrecognizable, where your own skin stops feeling pain. This woman wasn't a warrior, she was a vulva, a Norse seeress, a sorceress who communed with the gods. And she was buried with the key ingredient to creating a berserker. Think about that. The most feared warriors in the Viking world may have been manufactured by women using poison seeds. Let's start with what the Berserkers actually were, because the sagas describe something far stranger than just angry men. Snorri Sturluson, writing in the Ynglinga saga in the 13th century, gives us our most famous description. Quote, "His warriors went into battle without armor, raging like dogs or wolves. They bit their shields and were as strong as bears or bulls. They killed men, but neither fire nor iron had effect upon them. This is called going berserk." Neither fire nor iron. That's not poetry. It's a clinical description of a state where the body stops responding to pain, where a man can take a sword slash and keep moving forward without flinching. But here's what the sagas also tell us, and what popular history conveniently skips. The Berserkers were feared by their own side. In the sagas, they're almost never the hero, they're the problem. They arrive at a king's hall, beat their shields, challenge men to duels they can't possibly win, and take whatever they want. Hrolf's saga Kraka describes berserkers as men the king keeps around because they're useful in war, but who everyone else avoids like a disease. They burned hot, and then they collapsed. For over 200 years, the most common explanation was a mushroom. Amanita muscaria, the red-capped mushroom with white spots, the one you've seen in every fairy tale illustration and Super Mario game. In 1784, a Swedish priest named Samuel Odin proposed the theory. He had read reports of Siberian shamans using fly agaric to enter trance states. The symptoms seemed to match: altered consciousness, strange behavior, a feeling of invincibility. And for 2 centuries, that was the story. Berserkers ate magic mushrooms. Now, forget everything you just learned, because here's the problem with the mushroom theory. First, there is zero archaeological evidence of Amanita muscaria use in Viking Age Scandinavia. No mushroom residues in graves, no identifiable preparation tools, no references in the sagas, nothing. Second, the symptoms don't match. Amanita causes nausea, vomiting, profuse sweating, and drooling. Berserkers were described as fighting with superhuman strength and precision, not puking behind a tree. And Amanita doesn't numb pain, it can amplify it. Third, Dried amanita loses potency quickly. A berserker on a weeks-long sea voyage would have carried a pouch of useless mushroom dust by the time he reached the battlefield. The mushroom theory was a guess from the 1700s, and it was wrong. Which brings us back to that grave in Firkat, to Henbane. In 2019, an ethnobotanist named Karsten Fatur at the University of Ljubljana published a study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. He compared every known intoxicant available to the Vikings against the saga descriptions of berserker behavior. Amanita failed on almost every point, but Henbane matched the symptoms with disturbing precision. Henbane contains tropane alkaloids, specifically hyoscyamine and scopolamine. If you've ever had surgery, you've been given a synthetic relative of scopolamine. It's one of the most powerful delirium-producing compounds in nature. Here's what Henbane does to the human body, and here's why every single symptom matches the sagas. Pain. Henbane is a powerful analgesic. It blocks pain signals at the receptor level. This explains the saga descriptions of warriors who couldn't feel iron or fire. They literally couldn't. Face recognition. Scopolamine impairs the brain's ability to recognize human faces. This is clinically documented. A berserker on Henbane would look at a shield brother and see a stranger, would look at a stranger and see nothing worth hesitating over. The sagas say berserkers attack both sides indiscriminately. Now you know why. Body temperature. Henbane causes vasodilation. Blood vessels widen, blood pressure drops, the skin flushes red. Berserkers were described as throwing off their armor, stripping down to bare skin or animal pelts. They weren't being dramatic, they were overheating. The shaking. Sagas describe berserkers shivering, teeth chattering, body trembling before battle. That's not rage. That's a known side effect of tropane alkaloids, muscle tremors and chills that precede the delirium. And most importantly, the duration. Amanita wears off in a few hours, but the sagas describe berserkers as being incapacitated for days after their rage subsided. Weak, exhausted, barely able to stand. Henbane intoxication, especially at the doses needed to trigger full delirium, is followed by a recovery period that can last 2 to 3 days. Severe dehydration, muscle breakdown, a hangover measured not in headaches, but in the inability to function as a human being. But here's where it gets darker. There's evidence that the berserker state wasn't something just anyone could achieve by eating the right seeds. Egil's saga, one of the most important Icelandic sagas, describes a man named Kveldulf. The name means evening wolf. Kveldulf was a landowner, a farmer. During the day, he was normal, but as evening approached, something changed. He became irritable, then hostile, then dangerous. People learned to stay away from him after sundown. The saga explicitly describes this as a condition he was born with, not something he chose, not something he took, something he was. Kveldulf wasn't a battlefield berserker. He was a man whose own body produced something that resembled the berserker state. And his descendants, his son and his grandson, the famous Egil Skallagrimsson, inherited the same condition. Egil's saga was written in the 13th century, but it preserves something older, the understanding that whatever made a berserker wasn't simply a choice or a drug. There was something in the blood. Modern researchers have proposed that some berserkers may have had a genetic predisposition, possibly a metabolic condition that caused endogenous episodes similar to Henbane intoxication. Combined with ritual drug use, combined with the expectation that certain men would become berserkers, you have a perfect storm of biology, chemistry, and belief. But the berserkers didn't just terrify their enemies, they terrified their own society. And eventually, their own society destroyed them. 1123 CE, Iceland passes a law. The Gragas, the medieval Icelandic law code, declares that anyone who enters a berserker frenzy is guilty of lesser outlawry. Penalty: 3 years of banishment. If anyone present fails to restrain the berserker, they receive the same punishment. Let that sink in. Failing to stop a berserker was a crime equal to being one. The law didn't just punish the berserker, it punished the community for tolerating him. By 1123, Christianity had already reached Iceland. The old ways, the animal skins, the trance states, the battle fury, had no place in a Christian kingdom. Berserkers weren't warriors anymore, they were criminals, pagan relics, an embarrassment. Men who had once been the tip of the spear became the enemy within. And here's the final piece history books skip. The word berserker survived. The image of the raging Viking warrior survived. But the truth was systematically erased. The sagas that described them were written by Christian monks who viewed berserkers not as heroes, but as cautionary tales, examples of the chaos that existed before the church brought order. So what were the berserkers really? They were not an elite warrior brotherhood. They were men, possibly biologically predisposed, possibly drugged into delirium, who could be aimed at an enemy but never controlled. They were useful in war and dangerous everywhere else. They were the price Viking society paid for having a weapon that couldn't be sheathed. And they were made, at least in part, by a plant that grew wild across Scandinavia. A plant so toxic that it blurred the line between man and animal. A plant powerful enough to create warriors who felt no pain, and destroyed enough that their own people eventually had to outlaw them just to be safe. From the grave of a sorceress in Denmark, to a law code in Iceland, to a scientific paper in 2019, the berserkers are still telling us who they were. We just haven't been listening. If these hidden Viking facts blew your mind, hit the like button and subscribe. It would really help this channel as we uncover the warrior cultures they erased from history. And let me know in the comments, what do you think berserkers really were? Warriors, victims, or something in between?